guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Britt and I talk about geeky things. So if you are not subscribed, you should be. Go ahead and click the link. Otherwise, wait until the end of the video and click the whatever we're calling those silly new annotation type things. This week I'm going to do another episode of one of my personal favorite series on this channel, and that is an episode of nostalgia. If you're not familiar with the series that I do called Nostalgia, get yourself familiarized. I'll put a playlist link at the end of the video for you guys to know what the series is mostly about. But essentially, I've been a fan of television and other things for a very, very long time. I'm really nostalgic and I really miss the 90s. This particular thing I'm going to talk about, not from the 90s, except for in Japan. However, I got into it in the early 2000s and I really just love looking back and thinking about all the good memories that certain things bring me. And this week on Nostalgia, or this episode of Nostalgia, we'll be talking about Inuyasha. So I love talking about Inuyasha because Inuyasha is kind of has an interesting story with me. And it's one that I just absolutely love to tell and one that I love to share with people. It's one of those I had to put my foot in my mouth kind of situations. So when I was in high school, my best friend from high school, Nikki, really loved anime, and she still does to this day. We're still really, really good friends. She's still my sister. She always will be. When we were in high school, she was determined to get me into anime, and I just refused. I liked some anime, things like, you know, different monster animes like Monster Rancher or Digimon or Pokemon. I liked, you know, some anime as far back as the early 90s when I watched 90s anime on, probably wasn't 90s anime, it was probably 80s anime, but done in the 90s in America on Nick Jr. So I have liked anime for a very long time. I just didn't like it as like a genre or a medium until I was 16. This is not the story of how I got into anime. However, I know I have told that story, but I'm sure I will tell it again sometime in the future with an episode of Nostalgia. When she was trying to get me into anime, one of the things she tried to use was Inuyasha. She knew that I would absolutely love Inuyasha, and she was not wrong. My love for Inuyasha has brought me my favorite mangaka, Rumiko Takahashi, and it has brought me so much joy and so much frustration over the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years I've been, I don't know, how old, 14 years since I started watching Inuyasha. Holy crap. So at first she started talking about Inuyasha and telling me how adorable he was, how cute he was, because he had these little dog ears, and I kept picturing like a dog like Pluto in my head, which was super bizarre, and I don't know why, but it was really fun because the very first thing of Inuyasha I ever saw was the second episode of the Thunder Brothers episodes. I can't remember what they're both called, but it was the second episode. So essentially what ended up happening was Nikki was not going to be home for whatever reason, I don't remember, but she wasn't going to be home. So she asked me if I could record it for her. She didn't have recording capabilities. I don't know why. I think it was just her lame attempt at trying to get me into it. And I kind of knew that even then, so I was very adamant about not being a part of it. So I took one of my tapes, I recorded the episode overnight while I was sleeping, and then I checked it in the morning just to make sure that I had it totally recorded. And so what I did is I just watched the first couple seconds of it. It's about a minute, actually. It was the very first, like I said, it was the second episode of the Monten Hiten episodes where Shippo is first introduced. And all I remember, and I told her this is exactly what I told her. I said, all I really remember is a mole, lizard, but whatever, a mole falling from the sky, putting his hand on his head and saying, I wish I had some hair. It was then that she told me that she actually already saw that episode. She didn't need to see it again, so I could bring the tape home. And I did, and I actually still have the tape, and I still have that moment recorded. I've recorded over that tape actually a couple of times, but I have maintained that moment in my history because it's the first thing of Inuyasha I ever saw. And now that I love Inuyasha, it's actually something that brings a smile to my face whenever I do come across that episode, whenever I rewatch it. So that's just something that I will always have with Inuyasha. She told me that character's name was Monten, and so for the longest time I just always told her that my favorite character from Inuyasha was Monten. It was basically me antagonizing her, and I said, yeah, well, that's my favorite character, Monten. And finally she got so irritated with me. She goes, Monten dies! And then I went into mourning because my favorite character from Inuyasha died. And I'm like, well, now I'm not going to ever watch it because number one, you spoiled it, and number two, my favorite character dies. So what's the point in watching it? So I was really just trying to antagonize her back then because I didn't want to get into anime. Fast forward to when I actually did get into anime, I asked her what are some other animes that I should be checking out. She goes, well, I keep telling you about Inuyasha, you need to watch Inuyasha. She didn't have any episodes to show me at the time, so I decided, well, okay, I will just start recording it and I will watch it. I've always been a morning person, so I usually am in bed by 10:30, and definitely asleep by about 11. Sometimes I'll stay up a little bit later, but it's rare, especially during the school year when I was in high school. I just didn't stay up late because I always got up ridiculously early to be at school, and that's just the way my life has always been, so that's just the way it always will be. So I was sleeping whenever Inuyasha was on. So I recorded it, and actually I named the tape, I am sleeping, so I'm taping Inuyasha. Because I'm clever. So the very first full episode of Inuyasha I ever saw, and I do know this name, it is The Lake of the Evil Water God, which is the last episode of season 1, and it is very Moroku-centric. In my opinion, it's very Moroku-centric. I realize it's not actually Moroku-centric, but it has one of my favorite Moroku lines ever. And I knew from the beginning that Moroku was going to be my favorite character, but in high school, we all had this, my group of friends who all liked anime, we had this rule that we couldn't share favorite characters. So if a character was already spoken for, you had to choose a different character to have be your favorite. Nikki had already spoken for Moroku, and she got first dibs because she was the first one into Inuyasha. So I knew I couldn't like Moroku, so I decided to have Inuyasha be my favorite character, while secretly I loved Moroku. And I don't have to be secretive about it because I did eventually be able to have Moroku as my favorite character. So there's that. Then that rule doesn't actually apply. And actually there was yet another rule, but we'll get into that in a different video, I think, a different episode of Nostalgia. But there was one other rule when it came to my favorite characters and who I could choose as my favorite characters. Because this happened actually relatively frequently, that her favorite character and my favorite character could have possibly matched, so she set up a special rule just for me. So I had Inuyasha be my favorite character for the longest time until I finally had the nerve to tell her my favorite character isn't Inuyasha anymore, it's Moroku. And like, I was terrified. I was downright like hurt and upset that I was going to hurt and upset my best friend. Only to find out that she had decided that Inuyasha was kind of her favorite and she was worried about telling me the same thing. So we switched favorite characters, and I got to love Moroku and Sango, and I got to love them as a couple, even though all of my friends throughout all of high school told me it was never going to happen, and I knew it was, and I held true until I stopped watching Inuyasha because of only Sango. So one of the most Moroku Sango-centric episodes, and it made me stop watching Inuyasha, because I call it, and I think you heard me say this last week, it is the anime equivalent of clickbait. For crying out loud, they made it sound like they were going to finally get together, and they didn't, and it made me so angry that I quit watching the show for like a year and a half. Actually, it was like 2 years. I didn't get back into Inuyasha right away. So I actually got out of anime for a little while, and I didn't actually get back into anime for about a year and a half. Which again, I can tell that story later in a different episode of Nostalgia, but then I actually didn't get it back into Inuyasha right away. It wasn't until I actually started watching Psych that I got it back into Inuyasha. That's because Richard Ian Cox was in an episode of Psych, and I was like, Inuyasha's voice! Whoa! I wonder what's going on in Inuyasha world right now. And then I found out that the one thing I wanted to have happen, spoiler alert, happened. And so I got caught up, and I realized too that the series was going to end. And so I got super excited about that. So I got caught up just in time to see the series finale. And the series finale made me so angry that again I stopped watching it for a long time until the final act was announced. Again, I talked about this a little bit last week in my 50 facts video, but I actually refused to watch Inuyasha because I was so angry with how it ended. There are so far 2 shows in the history of my life that I loved but now refuse to watch because of how it ended, and obviously Inuyasha is different because the final act actually ended the show. The other one is How I Met Your Mother, but we're not going to get into that either. But yeah, so I didn't watch Inuyasha for a long time until the final act was announced. And I didn't get into the manga right away either. Never felt like there was a necessity to get into the manga because I knew that the manga was very similar to the show. So there was really no interest in getting into the manga until the series ended, and I realized that it didn't actually end, and it ended like Well, we didn't destroy Naraku. Maybe next time. The end of Inuyasha. I just felt super unsatisfied by that. So I started actually reading the manga illegally. There was a website at the time that was just for Inuyasha scanlations. And so I was reading those without realizing what I was doing and what I was doing was bad. And so then I learned that things were bad, that was a bad thing to do. And so I stopped doing that until the last volume, until the last chapter came out, and then I read that. Because I just wanted to know how it ended, because there was no possible way that they were going to come out with another series of it, because why would they? Because why would they? But then the final act was announced, and I felt really bad about it, because I actually got to learn how it ended legally, so I started collecting the manga in the Viz Big version, and currently I've taken a little bit of a step back from purchasing it, only just because I have now purchased the amount of volumes that I have read illegally, and so I felt better about it. I do eventually want to have the whole series just to have it, but honestly, these are the only Viz Bigs I'm ever going to really truly collect the whole series on, because number one, Inuyasha's way too long, and two, it's going to say, well, it kind of pays to the same thing, it just takes up less space on my shelf. So, you know, there's that. But also, I have no real interest in reading it because I'm not a huge fan of the Viz Bigs and holding them and trying to read the manga. So I much prefer like the new Viz version of doing it, which is just 2 volumes and a little bit smaller, just a regular size book, really. So I decided that that's how I was going to collect Inuyasha, just so that I could have it and pay Rumiko Takahashi the money that I read illegally, because obviously being my favorite mangaka, I feel like she deserves all of the money from all the series that she has ever created, and I love her. But yeah, so that is how I got into Inuyasha, and that's kind of my feelings on Inuyasha and things like that, my favorite character, my OTP, and my very strange roller coaster relationship with that show, spanning 167 episodes in the first series, 4 movies, and then 26 episodes for the final act. It's been an interesting ride with Inuyasha over the years that I have loved it. I'm currently rewatching it, and I can't wait to share with you guys some rants out of love. So if you guys want to hear some rants out of love about Inuyasha, let me know in the comments below. Also give me a thumbs up to let me know that as well, that you want to partake in some of those rants out of love and hear some of the things that I hate about Inuyasha. I'll give you one clue right now, Kikyo. Anyway, I will see you guys all next week, and I am still very terrible at these outros, so how about that end screen just pops up now?